Good day, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Factually Speaking. And today we are honored to have with us the presence of Dr. Francis Severin, who is the Pro Vice Chancellor and Principal of UE Global Campus. And he's joining us to further our discussion on crime in Dominica, the escalating crime rate, which we dealt with in a previous program. And today, Dr. Severin will be here to share his thoughts with us on this very interesting issue in this country. And the reason that we have Dr. Severin here today is because I think as many as 10 years ago, Dr. Severin, or is it 10 or 14 years ago, I think, 14 years ago, you were reported, in the news as saying in the village of Wesley, the Pissology conference that was taking place there, making the point that the number of murders in Dominica the year before surpassed the numbers of a small parish in Jamaica. I think it was Portland you were referring to. The year before, it had been reported that some 14 murders had taken place in Dominica. That was the year 2010. You said in your own words, I am told in 2010 there were 5 murders in the parish of Portland. And you pointed out that the population of Portland in Jamaica is bigger than the total number of people in Dominica. Portland having 81,000 people, I believe you reported at the time. And its rate, the year before you made the statement, was 6 per 100,000, while in Dominica, according to what you said, we were peaking at 20 per 100,000. Okay? Then you were criticized severely for that. Okay, you went on to say, when Francis Severin speaks about those things, there's no need to get upset with him. But as I said, leave them alone, and they will come home, wagging their tails behind them. And I'm seeing now, quite refreshingly, the same people who alluded to me in the highest court of this country are now saying that there is crime and we must do something about it. So interestingly, Dr. Severin, 14 years later, the situation has not changed. In fact, it has escalated, it has worsened. And we did a program, as I said, just recently, one of the Factually Speaking podcasts, the first one, I think. And McCarthy Marie, and I call him Mac, so eloquently articulated the situation in Dominica based on figures, on statistics, not hearsay, not, opinion, but on statistics. So before we get back to you, I want to ask Mark Marie to do a recap of what we presented on the crime situation in Dominica in that program. Mark?
Yeah, well, our first program, which was on crime and punishment in Dominica, highlighted the fact that Dominica actually had a very high crime rate, which was higher than the world average, actually higher than the United States, which we tend to think of as a violent place. Yes? And we showed that in 2017, we had 19 murders, which gave us a crime rate of 27.32 per 100,000, which means that at the time Dr. Sabre was speaking, he was saying that we had a crime rate, murder rate, of 20 per 100,000, at that time. So the situation has degraded, and I think at the time you were saying that, you were trying to warn us that we need to do something, otherwise it would get worse. But unfortunately, your prediction has come true. So maybe the first thing we would like to ask you there is what you saw in Dominica, besides the bare fact of the crimes themselves, that led you to believe that we needed to do something specific, otherwise we would be going down this slippery road, which we have gone down.
Yes, a very pleasant and refreshing, if that word can be invoked at all, given the topic and given the climate. Afternoon to both of you, Tim and McCarthy. I hope you do not mind the first name. I mean, as I listened to the team repeat or recount what I had said, it was a retreat, I think, or it was a sort of a conference.
Peace conference.
We didn't use the word webinar in those days. It was in person. It was at Our Lady of La Soie in Wesley Parish. And in fact, at the time I made this pronouncement, I think it came subsequent to a radio program on Matt in the Morning, the Hot Seat, where I also made comparable or similar statements. And as you quite rightly said, Tim and McCarthy, there was an outcry and some disparaging remarks were made about me. One of the things, being in the public domain is that when people say things about you, you don't recognize yourself in it. You say, but is that me? I mean, it's an out-of-body experience because you don't know yourself to be that person. And let me say very authentically that my aim at the time was not to make any public personnel or any government uncomfortable. It was a legitimate, genuine, and authentic concern for Dominica. And here is where it emanated. Having studied in Jamaica, and I did the MSc in sociology. And of course, Jamaica is the nursery, the best place to do that. And you learned a number of things when you attended your postgraduate seminars and that sort of thing. You learned about what happened in garrison constituencies. You learned about protection money. You learned about the dons and that sort of thing. And you heard the anxiety, you heard the concern by Jamaicans who were your contemporaries. And therefore, Jamaicans who knew the halcyon days, who had a nostalgia for the past, Jamaicans who recall going to the Caribbean or going to downtown Kingston and looking at the full moon. And now they bemoaned that they could no longer do that because of the extreme crime and violence. And what did I extrapolate from that? I extrapolated that within your own lifetime, there could be such cataclysmic change that in your lifetime, you could go during your youth from seeing a peaceful society to a very violent society. And I felt I did not want that in Dominica as well, because I was aware that growing up, I mean, opposite Astafan, where your father left the windows of his car down so that air could pass through the vehicle. Now you don't do that today. So I lived through that. Or sometimes he would take his car to the Botanic Gardens to park it under a tree for shade and not fear that the car would disappear or someone would break into it. This is not the feeling or the sensibility that you can have today. So it is those things that you take for granted that I felt could unfurl rapidly in Dominica, as they did for my contemporaries in Jamaica. But there's also some other, what you call scary signs that gave me pause, that caused anxiety. You saw situations where there could be a quote-unquote conspiracy between politicians and bad men, politicians and dons that could, in a sense, become, or more than a sense, in good reality, become what is referred to as organized crime. And that interlink where you had you had dons, you had gunmen, you had criminals doing your work for you in your constituencies to sort of keep the order, quote unquote, and that turning into political victory. I did not want to see that in Dominica. And everyone will say to you, and one of the books that a friend gave to me in as a gift in Jamaica, it's called Born for Dead by Laurie Guns, a journey through the Jamaican posse underworld with an afterword by Leon Ross, where in graphic detail you understand how what Jamaicans will say to you when you are having a conversation, that it started with those garrison constituencies, those politicians who sort of participated in activities through these criminals, and these criminals in turn being protected by the quote-unquote state or the party. And therefore, they could do whatever they wanted, and they would not be brought to justice. So you had all the victims and so on. And again, I recognize that Jamaica is a huge country. And you mentioned, I spoke about Portland, a parish of 81,000 people. And it is quite possible to argue, therefore, that if a Don man, if a brutal criminal could control a population in a parish, 81,000, 100 and something thousand and so on, then it means, therefore, if we argue logically, that it could just take one man to control the entire population of Dominica, which was less. And Mark, I've heard of your explorations of the population growth or lack thereof. And it means that when your population is, 75,000 and so on, and declining, it means it's very easy to control, to enwrap, to encamp an entire country to criminal activity and having the power of the gun and the funding. And these were the kinds of factors that bothered me. And I mean, when you talk about garrison constituencies, where there were constituencies where, a particular party, and it was on both sides in Jamaica, could not lose the election. And there is a story, I don't know how true it is, but the former Prime Minister's constituency, Portia Simpson Miller. Now, I don't know how true it was, but that was the tale that you would hear, that there was once where she won her constituency. She got more votes than electors in the constituency. I mean, that's very interesting and ridiculous as well. And someone asked about it, and she says, the electors, the voters, may have gotten a little over-enthusiastic. Now, I don't know how true that is, but you see those warning signs where, and it may not be for the same reasons, where you have electoral lists that are bigger than the population, and where you have those kinds of things, then it sets up your country for a free fall, and sometimes the damage is irreparable. Now, that's 14 years ago, 15 years ago, or thereabouts, that I felt that way. Imagine if we took active steps and we did not see Francis Severin as partisan, but we saw him as someone who had come back home from Jamaica, had seen certain things that bothered him, and he wanted, as a Christian, let us use the word Christian. Let's not even use the word patriot, which is pregnant with meaning, which has other connotations. But as a Christian, I felt a sense of duty to say to my fellow men and women, to my compatriots, that look, we have to look at this thing because our country can be sent. But I also remember saying, that it took a little while for Jamaica to get that way. But given development rates, given television and so on, we will, if we did not put a brake on it, we would descend even more rapidly into that state. And I'm saying to you, and as I was saying to the population, that at least in Jamaica, with 3.5 million people or thereabouts, when you are in, say, Upper St. Andrew, and a murder or any sort of violent crime takes place downtown Kingston, Coronation Market, for instance, it still feels a bit far. But imagine you, team, at Castle Comfort, and a murder takes place in Newtown. It's not far. It's a neighbor that has been murdered. And that is the point I have made. And it is so disappointing and not a little distressing to me that when I said these things, a lot of my fellow educated persons did not that I want anyone to come to my rescue, because I was confident in what I was saying, as I'm still. But you would think that others would say, yes, Francis, yes, Dr. Severin, this is true, and we really have to put our heads together. We have to form partnerships in order to deal with these things. Instead, they joined the vulgar and the depraved and the immoral criticisms and disparaging remarks. And when we go that way, that's our society will descend. What I said at the time, that I did not want to be correct, and I did not want one day to say, I told you so. And here am I today, an out-of-body experience where I can say to you, but not with any sense of pride, but with a deep sense of sadness, that I told you so. And it's not prophecy, I am not a prophet. I was going strictly by what I saw and the trajectory and the facilitating factors that would have led us to where we are today. So it is left to see, based on what I have just said, whether I'm going to get more of these disparaging remarks. Because the fact is that all what I have said is true and is not contingent on whether or not you are happy with what I said. It is totally independent of that. It has a life of its own, and unless you pull it back, then it will not resolve itself. It will become worse. That's my opening remarks.
Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Severin.
Okay.
The point that you're making, right, about the possibility of, say, one man, given what is happening in Jamaica, and the possibility of one man, for example, taking control, if you will, of crime in the country, getting to the position where he can actually control the country through crime. It's interesting that you mentioned that, because we've had some of the information that we've come up with from the police indicates that there are a number of crimes that have not murders, missing persons who were killed, and that have not been solved. There are some that they have been able to solve, but others that they have just not been able to solve. They can't find, they can't come up with an accused. They can't come up with somebody to charge. They can't find who committed the murder. And there's a lot of speculation, and perhaps rightly so, that those murders may have been gang organized. They may have been executions. So it kind of suggests that there is some of that happening in this country as
Yeah.
far as murders are concerned.
I understand in point of fact that there are now 4 of those kinds of murders that are basically assassinations. Somebody is killed in the middle of nowhere. There's no trace of who did the killing. Nobody knows. There are 4 of those, where police hasn't been able to interrogate anybody because there are no witnesses. It happened in, Dominica has lots of mango trees. So there's no policeman under that mango tree, and the 4 persons have been murdered, and there's no trace as to who did it.
And all of that is not surprising to me, based on again my experience in Jamaica and what I have seen. I mentioned organized crime a little earlier, and one, you see, there are lots of factors that are taking place here. In this book by of political sociology, and he really specializes in crime and delinquency, and has written a number of books, monographs, as well as periodicals on this. It speaks of the 5 critical aspects of organized crime. Its treatment of crime as an enterprise or business activity. When crime becomes a basis, so through drugs, for instance, where you have your agents selling drugs, you have the drug mules and that sort of thing, and it becomes business activity. And of course, what happens with that, the money laundering and so on. Then you have the extension of these activities from the underground to the formal economy via various linkages and partnerships. This defines the money laundering. So that the funds that emerge from these underground activities are passed through the mainstream and legitimate system and leaves no tail of the undercurrents and the source of the funds. Now that's very important. The social support among the people. One of the things that troubled me, and you see it in Jamaica as well, is when people who are known criminals have a support base. They go to the courts and there's a crowd supporting them. It's known that they have killed, they have done all sorts of things, And I suppose it's like the story, coming back to the Christian linkage, between Barnabas and Barabbas and Jesus. Free Barabbas, but crucify Jesus. And I mean, if you think of the contemporary sort of scenario and imagery of Barabbas being the criminal and Jesus being the good man, it means that there is a reversal of mores and cultural values that seems to privilege the criminal and, in a sense, downplays the good person. So social support, political engagement, and influence. I mean, it's very frightening, and I'm sure when you drive your vehicles, motorcycles overtake you on both sides. And when you hear rum, you may shift to this side, or the side of the motorcycle who was passing the wrong side. And fellas want to beat you up. And if these fellows have any connections, you have no recourse, And these are the issues that one must not skirt around. They actually take place. Use of managed violence to achieve objectives. And you speak about assassinations, executions, where people just disappear, and one of the things that you see, and that happens in Trinidad, that happens in Jamaica. Let's make let's not fool ourselves. But one of my motivations is that in this 291 square kilometers, I think it is, with 75,000 people, I don't know, you can correct me. I always think it's much less than that, to tell you. Just passing through the town, I sort of perceived that the truck, when I came in yesterday, I said to the taxman, but where are the people? I didn't even see people sitting on the side of the road, so there's a serious issue. But the fact remains that when people disappear and you cannot account for that, and years pass in a little country, that is cause for grave, no pun intended, and deep, very deep concern. And it brings me seamlessly to the other issue. It is if you, one of the fundamental causes, quote unquote, of crime, and let us phrase it in a different way. One of the factors that facilitate crime is a sensibility of a disorganized police force or corrupt police force. And you cannot get away from that. Again, drawing upon some of the examples of the other countries where the crime rate is high, you can draw the correlation between the two. As I get older, I seem to be referring to the Bible very often. And not that I know it so well. I'm not very au fait with the Bible, but some things come up. Betrayal was a fundamental sin and issue for Jesus Christ. Betrayal was problematic. One of you eat with me tonight will betray me. And hear the punishment. And hear how bad it is. It is better, it would have been better for that man to not have been born. I am extrapolating, Tim and Mark, to say that one of the most fundamental aspects I think the highest level of betrayal is if someone disappears because they have reported a crime and have given names to the police. When you lose confidence in the confidentiality and the tendency to anonymity in your police, then you are in serious problems. As the Jamaicans say, dog near your supper. In Dominica, we say, crap will smoke your pipe. You're in serious troubles. So when somebody disappears because they have said, look, I think there's such and such going on. And the fact is that you see those things. What you don't know is that, when I spoke about all of these things here, there was an incident where someone in 2015 came into my garage and smashed, in April 2015, the windshield of my Vitara at the time, right on a Saturday morning. I called the police and I said to the police who I suspected it was. And I wish I had my phone or some camera at the time, because it was a Kodak moment. The expression of the police was, Doc, you don't expect me to help you with that. Because that person, that is the expression on the police's face. That person is politically connected. And yes, I understand your suspicion, but you don't expect me to go anywhere with that. Essentially, if you should summarize it, you are on your own. So that matter was never solved. But the person I suspected who did it is now deceased. So never ask me when you meet me who I think it is, because I won't tell you. But I wasn't saying to the police to go to arrest the person, But if I am a victim and I'm trying to assist the police, given threats that I got and given interactions I've had, the least the police could do is to study the matter, look at it, ask questions discreetly, ask other people confidentially, and so on, and try to solve the case. But the thing was dropped right away. I am saying to you that today is mine, tomorrow is yours. Now, as Christians, is it? I am telling you that I am concerned, and I was concerned then, and it was not a political biased concern. It was a concern that I did not want that for posterity. But we talk about sustainable development all the time. I did not want, I wanted to do what I could to improve and enhance the life chances of the future generation. Now, all of us in this room were much younger 15 years ago. Can you imagine if we dealt with it? We wouldn't have had to have this today, or we would have been having a nice little discussion on how there was intervention to mitigate those circumstances. So it's you know, this thing about confidence in your police force, your trust in your police, or thinking that it is a waste of time. I mean, if evidence disappears, that's troublesome. You know, it means that there's no recourse. And I'm saying that a lot of the people some people who criticized me at the time, some of them themselves may have fallen victim to crime. And in their final moments, probably said, boy, I wish I'd listened, because you don't know where it will strike. You know, so all of us must be concerned about this thing. And it has to be, as Sustainable Development Goal 17 says, it has to be partnership, a collaborative effort. It cannot be partisanship. It has to be all of us saying, we want this paradise to remain. Because the only, our strongest attribute in Dominica, and I boasted to the Jamaicans, was that we had a peaceful society. You could go anywhere. There was no crime. And so that was the strongest attribute. So we don't have international airport. We don't have all these restaurants. We don't have all of these places that the young people like to go to. We don't even have white sandy beaches, because that is a thing. Yeah, we respect our volcanic beaches and so on. But let's face it, the people like the beaches to look like the aqua beaches that you see, and the pink beaches you see in the Bahamas, and so on. When you're landing, you can actually see your feet below. We don't have all of that, but we had to create our niche as a safe haven. When you no longer have that, tell me what you have. Plus, if you put the loss of agriculture into the mix, you're really in a bad way. And this Mark and team, this is not a partisan thing. This is a call again. Let us come together. Let us unite to change the trajectory. Let us change course, so that in 15 years from now, we would be saying something different.
Let me just ask you a direct question. Do you think it's too late for us to change course?
No, nothing is ever too late. I mean, we have to be a people of hope, but we have to start post haste. In other words, we cannot again go back and theorize and say, okay, well, you know, let us start, you know, after Christmas. We have to do everything geared towards this. And the truth is that the way our very divisive political climate, you know, in terms of electoral hustings and running of elections and the colors that define us against them and so on, all of this creates a tension and a situation where partnership, collaboration is difficult to achieve. In fact, it's very interesting that you know, let me find it. I was, you know, when I was reflecting, and I'm saying some of these things off of the top of my head, you know, because sometimes you want the spirit to move you and say what you need to say rather than rehearse it. So when I attended Mass in Barbados on Sunday, and one of the readings, well, the gospel reading was Mark, from the Gospel of Mark, you know, and it said some very interesting thing, but Mark 7:21-23, from within people, from their hearts come evil thoughts, unchastity, theft, murder, adultery, greed, malice, you know. You know what is malice? Nastiness, mischievousness, deceit, just dishonesty, treachery, betrayal again, licentiousness, you know, just wastefulness, even ostentatious living. And that's what people want to do, to have big gold chains and so on. And therefore you will let off the blood of someone else to have those things. Envy, blasphemy, arrogance, folly. Folly is irrationality, stupidity. All these evils come from within and they defile. And I thought about it. I said, but herein lies the cause of crime. And you see, we have lost that community sensibility. You cannot develop a society when people are divided. You cannot develop a society where when there's a culture that you must not get ahead of me. So I am from FACTUALLY. I have done well for myself. You are slothful, indolent, and lazy, and you have done nothing for yourself. But rather than come to me and say, Francis, how do you do it? How do you get ahead? How do you succeed and accomplish all of this without stealing? Because that's a skill, you know, these days. That's not mainstream, you know. And I come back to the Barabbas and Jesus kind of thing. Because how do you do that? I would like to do like you. You're a good role model. No, that's not the disposition. The disposition is envy, betrayal, malice. I am going to bring you down because as a fellow black, you should not have gotten ahead of me. So I'm going to bring you down. And that portrays itself in robbery, in lying, in vulgarity, in gossip. So if within the organization, for instance, that to be promoted or to retain your job is not based on performance appraisal in a fair manner as dictated by human resource philosophies and practices, best practices, if it depends on gossip or who is able to lie more than the other, then that society cannot go anywhere when we keep dragging down each other. And the culture is not privileging honest and ethical work. We get you out of the way because you're too principled, you're too ethical. These values you have really would not allow us to get what we want. So you're shoved aside. I am promising you that when we embrace that culture, that is a promise, we are not going to get anywhere. We need, as Black people, we need, as, and I saw some of the clippings, you know, as people who are not far from the Cane piece, but who have done very well overall. I mean, think of the University of the West Indies, where we have created that. in the age of universities, 75, 76 years is not a lot of time to have gotten to the top 3% of the world. But yet, on the micro level, we keep dragging each other down rather than be proud of this good black young lady who has done well, this black woman who has done well for herself, or this black man who has done well for himself, who has been honest, who you have seen, the older folks have seen move from humble beginnings and has done so instead and to drag it on and to pull you down. So that, and the fact is that you cannot pay a mortgage by dragging down someone, You pay a mortgage by working hard, if that is what you want to do, and paying your mortgage. But dragging down someone else, causing
to ask
someone
you
else
a bit of a philosophical question there, Dr. Severin.
So it's a sad thing.
Right. Do you think we've gotten here because we've privileged the acquisition of material goods over everything else in life?
Yes, you see, this is what causes and I prefer to use the word not greed, but avarice. Avarice is a stronger word. Avarice has more imagery in it. It carries the notion of an insatiable appetite. You cannot stop. You want more and more and more, And I think that wanting to have everything that you see the richest people in America have is what I think partly driving. But I think, I mean, I never thought I would hear myself saying that, because I don't think I'm a very religious person per se. Follow the precepts that my parents have taught me. But I think we have lost our values. I think we no longer allow ourselves to be governed by the ethical principles. This is right, this is wrong. And even if I offend a friend by saying, no, my friend, what you have done is not right. I think you should have done this and that instead. And you can tell a person this quietly, but you lose friends these days by saying these things. I mean, I may lose friends by your podcast, but the truth is that at the end of the day, and has always surprised me, because when I said these things 15 years ago, I mean, because I don't live here, I keep hearing people saying, oh, they mention your name on the radio. Oh, Dr. Severin had said so and so. And it was never meant for any self-aggrandizement or for someone to quote me later on. I've always wanted a very peaceful and quiet life, but I was very interested and actually fascinated when Tim quoted all of the things that I said, and yourself, Mark, and I can see why you would ask me to come to the program. And in fact, the truth is that, let me reveal the truth. Mark and Tim. When Mark first asked me, was it at Fort Young Hotel when you got the awards? I think it was then.
Yes. Right.
And I was reluctant, because it's not a pleasant thing to be to hear your name publicly being disparaged when your intention was clean and evil. So I have to some extent withdrawn. I have said, well, okay, because you talk about the social support, if the society thinks that it wants to disparage the messenger for what essentially is the truth, then sometimes in your human weakness, you say, well, let the society knock itself out, because you know exactly what you're speaking about, and that is the point. And as I reflected, as I ruminated over what I might say. It is about, there's something, Mark, you would know that, called risk appetite in organizational terms, in auditing terms. I want to extrapolate crime appetite, the amount of appetite or stomach or taste, if you will, or palate that a society collectively has for crime. To what extent it is prepared to tolerate crime, different sorts of crime, money laundering, rape, theft, also murder. To what extent it is prepared to do it. And then there's something called victimless crime, where within the confines of your home, you do certain things that are illegal, but there's no real victim, There may not be a law, for instance, against using the power of your office to give rewards to a young girl, say for studying and so on, especially if she consents to sexual favors. But the question comes, and you can call it victimless crime, but the question now is that is fine. And when we talk about our society, we speak about those who go to church every Sunday or Saturday. To what extent all of these people collectively are prepared to look the other way when it happens because they do not want to criticize those people who do it out of deference. I don't know why there'll be deference, out of loyalty and so on. And as long as we're prepared to skirt around issues and dance around issues and pretend that those things don't exist, then society will have to knock itself out. It means that the society has a high appetite, a high proclivity to support socially crime. And it is very telling on the society. If you reflect, and I'm sure both of you are following the the US elections, and I'm sure you already can form an imagery in your mind as to what sort of society you will have. What is the trajectory of the society if a Trump and Vance ticket wins over a Harris and a Walz ticket? I mean, when you hear the disrespect for women and so on, and sometimes I think of it, but why are all these people of African descent are standing in the backdrop of Trump when he's speaking? And I wonder whether they're rewarded monetarily. In fact, I heard an idiot say at the Republican National Convention, a black man says that America is not a racist society. Now in the euphoria and the excitement of the public speaking and so on, he probably would have forgotten that that's been very disrespectful to Martin Luther King Jr. and others. Jesse Jackson and all of these people who have fought very hard. How can you say that sort of thing? But if the society is becoming more and more tolerant of these matters, disrespect to women, you could do whatever you want with the ladies, then it is troublesome. What troubles me too is the extent to which some people who should feel disrespected don't feel disrespected. And that to me is a very troubling and bothersome sort of sensibility that I have. When a politician like Trump and J.D. Vance stand up and say nasty things and disrespectful things of women, and there are women in the audience clapping, then it totally disarms me. I don't know what to say again.
Yeah, that's similar to this nasty business.
Yes.
Yeah.
Version of music that's Dominica.
Exactly.
No,
so
yes,
the culture is gaining an appetite, a taste. The culture can stomach that kind of business. I mean, look, the murder. I mean, I remember growing up when a murder took place. the society paused and everybody was talking about it. Now I don't know what's happening. I mean, if it weren't for your statistics, you know, people don't realize that it was 19 and it's 18 and so on. And almost prophetically, when I spoke about it, the thing just started, you know, and I hope no one is blaming me for it. The thing is that I saw this thing coming. Now, are we going to be foolhardy and again criticize the messenger or say, okay, he was right the first time, let us listen carefully to what he is saying?
Dr. Severin, in terms of the role of the police and the fact that what your point we've said so far indicates that the police that have been ineffective in terms of the role they ought to be playing in solving, controlling, preventing crime in this country. That is one aspect of that. In fact, you did mention the fear or the how should I put it, the reluctance of, say, the community to report crime to the police if they know they're not going to be protected, if they know they can't do that in with relative, if you will, safety in putting themselves on the line. We do have Crime Stoppers in Dominica, which to a certain extent is providing the opportunity for that. But your point still remains. I mean, Crime Stoppers is available. In fact, that was what sort of gave rise or provided the opportunity for Crime Stoppers to come into this country to help those people who have the same concerns that you're talking about to be able to present make reports and present information and tips to the police in cases where they would have feared, to go to the police in person. But apart from the role of the police, are there, from your sociological, perspective, any other factors that contribute, say, to the committing of crime by the average citizen in terms of perhaps the economic, disparities, for example, things like unemployment, substance abuse, those kinds of things?
The answer to, certainly in terms of inequality and so on, is an unequivocal yes. As you asked the question, I reflected on the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, most people think of the Sustainable Development Goals in terms of climate change and mitigating the effects of natural hazards and so on. The truth is that the Sustainable Development Goals go way beyond that. And if we want to begin to explore answers, or we want to begin to find insights into the multivariable causes of crime, I think one can look at the SDGs. I mean, SDG number 1, for instance, that's United Nations Development Goals, Agenda 2030. 2030 is around the corner. SDG 1 talks about eradicating every form of poverty. Poverty is, like biblically again, the seed of crime planted on fertile ground. Poverty creates this because the thing is that these people who are indigent and poor feel excluded from the rest of society. They feel that there is no hope. They feel that the legitimate means of overcoming poverty are out of their reach. And therefore, if a society does not resolve poverty and the number of people who are at the poverty line of the, beneath the poverty line, then that society is likely to have crime. Related to that, for instance, you have SDG 2 that talks about achieving zero hunger. And really, it's interesting how it is stated here. Yeah? It says, end hunger, achieve food security, and improve nutrition and promote sustainable agriculture. Now, again, they always say, and it's very true, the definition of madness is to do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result. And I want to apply that to agriculture. It is sad that a lot of our farmers have left the land, very fertile land, yeah? Dominica is very fertile land. I mean, you can tell just coming into the country, there's a green, the dark, verdant green, very fertile soil. But the fellows are standing on the Game Engineer Charles Boulevard with their buses waiting on the tourist ship. Now, if you take a cruise, I don't know whether either of you have taken cruises, there's everything on the boat. And some people don't even bother to come on the side of that ship or of the top. Just stay inside the ship and eat and that sort of thing. Dominica could feed the entire region, you know, and reduce its import bill on food, because food is expensive, but food is also necessary. So there'll always be need for food. And if we manage this thing, then we could have some of our taxi men going back to the soil, sustainable agriculture, and help to fight and bring us to the point of zero hunger. A lot of us, don't realize what's happening. And teachers who are underpaid, the same teachers are taking some of their monies to feed some children when they come to school. That would surprise you? No, you have to be a teacher. The teachers who don't get huge salaries, they are also trying to feed children because they care about their children, And the Teachers Association or whatever union should be saying those things, yeah? But I care about it because that's where I've come from. Goal 3, good health and well-being. Again, when you think of things like maternal mortality, when you think of deaths, I mean, even the population thing, good health can help to promote some of the things that you speak of. The whole idea of communicable disease and non-communicable disease, substance abuse, yes, all of this is causing, sexual and reproductive health and stress. Stress, the medics will tell you, can also impact your population growth. When you have 2 adults in a house, cannot feed the children. They're stressed out. They can't even procreate because of stress. All of those things, health coverage, pollution, all of these things come under Sustainable Development Goal 3. And these are inextricably bound to crime as well. Quality education. How responsible are we and how much money do we spend on quality education? Do we not spend it more on electoral hostings and campaigns and fetes and shows and that sort of thing? Are we spending money on quality education? I'll tell you someone who's spending money on quality education. Just one example, because he's secure within himself and he believes in it. Prime Minister Ralph Gonsalves. You can see what's happening within this country. The education is very important. And whenever a leader spends on education, I'm thinking of Prime Minister Gaston Brown as well, in facilitating the setting of the Five Islands campus. Education is important, but not only higher education, but education at all levels, where we can create the foundations for people to be able to participate.
Well, as you mentioned in education there, one of our main aims with this podcast here is to provide public education, the sort of stuff that's not taught at school, but which the citizenry needs to know so that they can make better decisions. Yes.
We're achieving, because the fact is that, and Sparrow made it some long ago, there is no place for little boy, little girl who does not have education. And you see, the society has to be fair as well, because one of the things you do not want to do is to frustrate educated people. So I've gone through all this, but then I come to get a job and I have to compromise my values in order to get a job. I thought, my parents told me, that's what the little girls will say. My parents told me that if I got an education, I could apply for a job. And, you know, based on my performance in the interview, not in bed, or not whether I had a good bikini, I could get a job. But if they find out that that is not so, then that is where, you know, you have the opportunity for crime and delinquency. I don't know whether you made that connection. And speaking about that, Sustainable Development Goal 5, gender equality. Gender equality, very, very important, you know, ending forms of discriminations against women and girls, ending violence and exploitation of women, you know, increasing value of unpaid care and promoting shared domestic responsibilities. Again, the whole aspect of reproductive rights and health and a woman's control over her body. And when those aims fail, then you have the opportunity for crime, where people feel dispossessed and not in control, you know. Another thing very important, decent work and economic growth. And I like how it is articulated. Foster sustained, inclusive, and sustainable economic growth, full and productive employment, and decent work for all. And what does that mean? That whether you're from FACTUALLY or Petit Severin or Maho or Mero or Taru, that you are given an opportunity to be educated, to gain academic credentials or skills. And when you get into that job, no one asks you whether you live at Castle Comfort or FACTUALLY. No one asks you who was your mother or father. Or, oh, you're from Bath Estate, oh, or you're from FACTUALLY. And if you're not, then there's a conspiracy. Or if you are from, there's a conspiracy against you. Okay? And I'm saying that, and that call for equality and decent work, it's not only a call for males to provide that, you know, but females in positions of responsibility, because you have females who, through various means, undermine other females, you know. So I'm saying that if people feel ill-treated, if people feel unfairly treated, then there is going to be an opportunity for crime. And I heard you speak, Mark, of the Gini coefficient.
Yeah.
The whole thing about equality, you know, reduce inequality within and among countries. And here is what the SDGs say. Progress towards targets will be measured by indicators. The first 7 targets are outcome targets. Reduce income inequalities. So it doesn't matter where you're from or your gender, you know, you should be paid equally for equal work. Promote universal social, economic, and political inclusion. Ensure equal opportunities and end discrimination. Adopt fiscal and social policies that promote equality. Improve regulation of global financial markets and institutions. If I feel as an educated person that I'm in a society that is constantly bludgeoning me and against me, and I'm paying all these taxes. Then I go elsewhere and I bring my skills and my professionalism to another country that appreciates me. You know, can't be paying taxes, and I'm bludgeoned, and I'm not given what I'm entitled to in the society. And I see indolent and lazy people who may not be doing anything. And, you know, because what you want to do is to encourage people of all classes, and you want to give them the best chance. And let me tell you something, yeah? The other thing that happened in Jamaica is that it lost its middle class, because the middle class is feeling disproportionately weighted down. So they left. And with them, their professionalism, their skills, their education, their entrepreneurship, and so on. And of course, the taxes that they would have been paying. And they brought it elsewhere. And you're left with the very rich at the top who are creaming the society, who are benefiting through legal and illegal means, and money laundering and fronting and so on, and the very poor. And you occasionally send down little crumbs, you know, like when you're feeding chicken, for instance, crumbs for people who may not know better. And what happens is that they feel that you're doing something good for them. But that is not how you build a sustainable society. You build a sustainable society by teaching people to fish, by empowering them, by educating them, by granting them skills that they can go out and achieve the dignity of valuable and honest work. And when you don't do that, then you have to keep sending little crumbs under the table for them every single time. And when you can no longer do it, my father would say, it is Beatties. And as John Grisham would say in his book, it is bedlam. And I'm saying to you, these are, if you look at the Sustainable Development Goals, if you want to begin to address crime, then you have to address those goals. And I'm saying that that is true and factual. What is the name of your program? Factually Speaking?
Yes.
That is true and factual, whether you like Francis Severin or not.
Severin, I think, you know, we had planned to ask you about some specific measures that could be taken, you know, to address the crime situation. But it seems to me that, you know, you just inadvertently
I
covered
preempted
all of those.
But Tim, he also answered one of the questions we had in our very first program, when we saw that at the turn of the century, we had 100,000 burglaries, and from 2010 to 2021, the number of burglaries declined considerably, which was looking very odd, while murders and so on are increasing. But he does explain why, what happened there. It's because those persons who have reported burglaries have not been treated well. So most people stopped reporting burglary. So we had less and less reports of burglaries.
That is a very important statistic. And when I did my undergraduate degree, use of English, with Professor Alsop, we did things like how statistics
use
lie,
of English,
you know?
right?
And if you torture the statistics sufficiently, they will yield to anything. But there is a dark figure of crime, the unreported crime, because people fail and so on. So a lot of victims don't report. Well, I went into this big manager's office or this big person's office, and to get a job, they said that I have to do this or I have to do that, or I have to keep my mouth shut for something. So that is never reported. That never sees the light of day. And it is frightening to think of how much of that it exists. Of course, you know, Tim and Mark, in all of those things and all of the things that people say because they're unhappy with your opinion, it's always good to know and to feel that there may be hate, There may be dislike, but you sense respect for your intellect and respect for the things that you know. And plus, people get a little frustrated when they cannot say things personally on you, or else they would have to make up something. In fact, one of the things that I find very interesting in the American elections is, again, and you look at it at the Trump equation, where there's a nuance between lying and making up stories. And I think the latter is worse. A lie takes certain data and sort of manages that data and tailors it to suit one's perspective. And I think sometimes they call it half-truths and so on, which is worse than full truths. Because it has a sense, it gives you a sense that you can believe it. But then there's that other part where you just make up a story. So I just make up a story on Tim Durant. But because I know I have a following, I know people will believe that story. And that is what you call malice. That is what you call deceit. And I'm saying that if that happens in your society, if that envelops your organizations, where you can just tell untruths, you can lie, you can and drag down your neighbor, then your society is in a lot of trouble. Your society is in a lot of trouble. The good thing about it, as Christians, we believe that there is always, everyone will one day have to answer for a lot of the things that they do. So in other words, I think that's what you describe as everyone will meet his or her Waterloo at a certain point in time. And that is what you feel can happen. But the truth is that I just want our society to be a peaceful society. But who is going to stay at home when the freedom fighters are fighting? Who is going to, and I'm not apologizing for being biblical. I think it's a thing of age, but that's what it means, if you want to follow me, Jesus said, you must put down your riches and so on and pick up your cross. So you cannot eat your cake and have it. You cannot steal and bribe and fool people and lie on people and still follow Christ. You have to jettison one and pick up the other. It's a simple matter like that. And if you cannot do it, and remember when Jesus told them that one of the very rich fellow went home feeling very distressed and sad. We have to find ourselves in a place where we don't feel distressed and sad when we have to do the right thing.
3 ways that have been, that generally are used in treating crime, in addressing crime, are essentially preventative punishment, preventing crime, prevention, punishment, and rehabilitation. What is your take on the approach that we use to address crime in this country in terms of those 3 different approaches?
I am not open with what is done now. I mean, I haven't paid attention to it. So my response is at best tentative and perhaps not a little theoretical. We obviously are not making any gains or many gains in terms of preventative. Because the facts speak for themselves. The evidence resides in the facts. So violent crime has been on the up and showing so far no signs of ebb. So there's a flu. And the question is, how does one, you know, prevent? Now, a lot of crime is opportunistic. Yeah, you don't go to town and leave your wallet on the seat of your car. Turn up your glass, but you go inside, say, with church or wherever. Because if someone is desperate and they see the wallet, then they will try to break into the car. You know, so that opportunistic thing, you as the person, so on a micro level, you have to do all you can. You have to protect yourself. You have to, and I heard in your program when you spoke about the burglar bars, you know, and even a burglar bar around the TV. I hope they're sophisticated enough to, when they're looking at TV, to open the padlock, and so that they don't have to look at the TV between grills. But I know that kind of protection. I see it in Jamaica, Barbados, all the time. But part of prevention is long term as well, you know, and that's why I say that we have to invest money in education and in early childhood education. And listen to this very carefully. The cost of education is far less than the cost of not educating the public. What is tragic is that education is fed by people who feel insecure by an enlightened population. And that has repercussions in everything. So you don't want the population to be enlightened because you don't want them to question your actions, whether it's in the public or in the organization or in the family. So you want to keep people in ignorance. You don't want to educate people because you feel that by educating people may mean that they are more aware of your shortcomings. But at the same time, when you don't educate people, you also leave them without skills, without opportunities to advance in life, and therefore they may take the approach of crime. And early childhood education, and we should be, and we're not talking about, and I'm not being disparaging of people who love children and who open early childhood centers in their school, in their backyard and so on. But we have to have very firm and structured policies and regulations that govern these things, because early childhood education is a particular aspect of education. And as part of it, it's not only 3 hours, reading, writing, and arithmetic, but also teaching our young ones to interact with each other. When people are ignorant, they don't solve their problems verbally by saying, okay, look, you did this to me. I think you really, sort of misinterpreted what I said, and A, B, and C, and they agree to disagree. But when you're ignorant and you cannot sort things out like that, you resort to blows. So I'm saying that educating your public is a long term, but you're going to see the benefits, you're going to see the multiplier effect later on. So I think we cannot get a high grade where that is concerned. Punishment, incarceration, sometimes that solves the problem temporarily. But we all look at Netflix and we see what happens in prisons, yeah? I don't know how bad it is in our prison, but when you have overcrowding situations and we speak of population Malthus theory, when experiments are done with rats, people behave like rats when they're put in the situation, so you have to start climbing over each other and that sort of thing. It's worse if it's happening in your general population, but worse, I mean, you see it in a concentrated way in the prison. If you do not have a penal system, an incarceration system that is decent. Some may argue that you cannot treat people decently if they have committed crime, but you know, there are different levels of crime. But if you throw, if a young man who again doesn't see life chances, doesn't see any future for him in the mainstream society, if he goes into a supermarket and steals flour and sugar and the ingredients to make a little Johnny cake and so on, you throw him in with criminals, hardened criminals, fellas who are raped and who are killed and so on. What is it you're expecting? He has to defend himself, and then when he comes out now, he's come out well. He emerges from prison well trained in combative sort of disposition. But all the man did was to steal sugar and flour. So when you have a penal system like that, I don't know what, as I said, my responses here are tentative, then you're in trouble. Rehabilitative,
this feeds into the school of thought. I was saying that this feeds into the school of thought that very harsh penalties can actually lead to what they call recidivism, which is repeat offenders, you know? Yes.
In any case, it leads to there's stigma as well. Mm-hmm. So when you come out, say this fella was in jail and he's a no good, you know, and so but if we have a system where we have and I'll tell you something, you know, at our UWI Global Campus, we have interventions like this. In Cayman, it's a very good intervention that we work with the prisons to educate, you know, people in prison, you know, continuing professional education and so on. These are the kinds of things governments should pay for and do, so that when these people, sometimes very young, come out of prison, you put them to work and they form the society. But when you put them back into society with no skill, then that's where the recidivism comes in. It's the same way that when you just bundle people in the US and you dump them back in Jamaica. Now, these fellas have never been to Jamaica before, you know. They don't know Tivoli Gardens. They don't know Trenchtown. They don't know, but you just dump them because their parents are from Jamaica. What are they going to do? They pick up guns, drugs, and so on, and it's bedlam in the society. And so you have to have a proper rehabilitative measure. There's sometimes people, and you have to carefully isolate why they committed the crime in the first place. And some of them are acting on behalf of big people outside there. And they cannot speak because their families are threatened. There's all of that too, you know. I don't know where it happens in Dominica. I cannot say it. But those are the things that happen in a lot of places. And so we cannot, at the very least, we cannot say that we have done from where I sit very well in those areas. But is it too late? We have to start somewhere. That's the thing, you know, we have to start somewhere. We cannot say it's too late, or we have to start somewhere. And starting somewhere is bringing everyone on board. And you say our population is going down. You know what's worse? Well, not worse, but the fact is that when you already have a reducing population, but from that population, you're discriminating who shall be in the mainstream and who shall be banished, then you're reducing the chances of development of your society even more. And you know what is disappointing, Tim and Mark? That you say those things and you expect people who are similarly educated as yourself to say, yes, that is true. Instead, they take you to task because you're hurt, their feelings, their political feelings. And I'm saying, and I'm promising you, that in spite of your best intentions, if we continue that culture, the society is going nowhere. And it is too small to be divided.
But Dr. Severin, there's something
it's also okay. Go
I've
ahead,
been saying, well, since the hurricane at least there, that after the hurricane we had looting that was of a kind of malicious nature, where the looters were saying it's our time now.
Yeah.
Yes, like they say, they had been, if you like, oppressed while everything, society was functioning more or less normally. Now that everything is smashed up, we are in control, and you are no longer in control. And I was saying, part of that reason, the reason for that feeling of us and them in a small place like Dominica is a bad housing policy, where we are building houses for the working class in one area, and housing for the middle class in another area, and housing for the upper class quite separately. And the only place they come together is in the economic sphere. Let's say when they come to Roseau to buy and shop and so on. That's the only time they meet each other. And they remain, in point of fact, virtual enemies. Yes, we talk about criminal gang, but the point of fact, you end up having a middle class gang, if you like, who doesn't want to hear anything about the working class person who might not have enough money to buy breakfast for all his children, and they have the upper class who don't care about any of them at all. So the society is not homogeneous; it's fractured, and people don't think of themselves as being part of one group. They think of themselves as their group being just the people with whom they live, and the people elsewhere are naturally the enemy, and vice versa. I don't know what your thoughts are.
And that goes to the heart of Sustainable Development Goal 10, the same matter of the need to reduce inequality, and promote social, economic, and political inclusion. Because if some of us feel left out, I mean, let's face it, and Hurricane Maria, some people got pig snout and some didn't. I am dumbing it down a bit, but it is the truth. Some people got caught fish and some did not. So you begin to feel that you are not in the center or the core of society. You're on the periphery. You're excluded. This flies in the face of Sustainable Development Goal 10, where people or you see the packers bypassing your home and going elsewhere, and you're not getting. So if you did not make allowance for yourself, you might starve.
Yeah.
What about the specter of your roof uncovered and you're getting no building materials that were sent by people, taxpayers elsewhere? But then there are people whose roofs are covered, but they have building materials stored.
Right.
And I'm saying that is a very ugly, but very, very graphic, very graphic portrayal and imagery of inequality. And our societies in the Caribbean and in Dominica must adopt fiscal and social policies that promote equality, or else people are going to feel on the periphery. But I tell you, we talk about African liberation, we speak about emancipation and so on. And we sing glibly the songs of Bob Marley, liberate yourself from mental slavery. And it is, but we don't reflect on how true that is and how these things reflect Sustainable Development Goal number 10, SDG number 10. The slave masters really succeeded in divide and rule, in creating divisiveness among ourselves, and in elevating some of us and suppressing the others, so that those of us who were in the great house could tell on, could undermine, could lie, could gossip on those. So if we want a little extra ration, we go and tell on Mark, and we tell on Tim, and we tell on Francis, so that we can be elevated. And it does not matter if when we tell on these people that they tie us to a tree and bludgeon us, right, but you get a little extra something to eat tonight. I am saying to you that it is no different among some people. And in the modern workplace, the divide and rule might continue. You get a group of people, especially if there's a particular melanin composition of the person in charge, and we get some of those who look like the person who they are wanting to suppress. And let us gossip, and let us complain, and let us lie, and so we can get ahead. Just a little something, and a little, crumb, but nothing that is sustainable, because you cannot empower these people who gossip and who lie and so on indefinitely, because if you do, you will not have control over them. So you give them a little at a time, a little drip at a time, and so on. And that is what we are doing. and that is what, if we keep people unequal, then we can control. Again, I want to say that if we do not adopt these SDGs and we do not promote universal social, economic, and political inclusion, then our society will not go anywhere. And I feel sorry for I feel sorry for all of us, but people who really should know better and who are not courageous enough or do not have the moral gumption to say, let us do better. And our children are going to reap the whirlwind. And these things, let me tell you, these are not political statements, These should be in the church's social teaching, So you should be hearing that, not from me. You should be hearing that from your priests and your bishops and your pastors, I can say them too, but you should be hearing that from these people. But they're leaving it, some of them are leaving it for others to see, because everyone wants to walk between the raindrops and skirt the issues and so on, which is essentially disingenuous and dishonest.
Mr. Severin, we really appreciate you being here. We got a lot more information than we bargained for, a lot more. So we want to thank you for agreeing to join us,